Hi, everyone. Welcome to Building Astropad, and Matt here. And today we've got a very special guest, my co-founder and partner in all things Astropad, Giovanni. Welcome, Giovanni.
Hey, Matt. Hello from San Francisco.
It's been far too long. It's been far too long since you've been on.
Yeah, I like I
So,
like to be in the backstage most of the time.
yeah, some surprise appearances here and there. So today we wanted to talk about, well, it's really like two topics kind of tied into one. We wanted to talk a bit about the history of Luna Display, how it came to be, how we got involved in hardware,
Hmm.
how a software company gets involved in building hardware at all, and kind of the messy beginnings of building new products and what that looks like. So where do you want to begin, Giovanni?
I like things messy. So
Yeah,
let's start from the messiness.
let's start with the messy.
Yes,
What's
yes.
what's the mess to you?
I mean, you mentioned, to have a podcast to talk about product design, how to come up with product ideas. And, this morning and just before coming on a call, I was going on a walk and thinking about the topic. And the only thing that I could identify was just how unpredictable and messy just coming up with new product ideas or in general evolution of our company too has been
Yeah, definitely.
a very convoluted road. And so, yeah, it's a messy process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and probably good for other people to hear too that are maybe building something for the first time. I think it should
Mm.
go in a very linear, stepwise fashion. It's like, well, it doesn't really work like that. There's a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah, yeah, and very different. The nature of the work too is very different than I think what you're used to when, you're working at a company on a 9 to 5 job. And, there's generally a mission or, you're hired for a purpose or a
Mm-hmm.
well-defined purpose. But maybe we should go back, yeah, again, in the way we shaped up the company. And what do you remember, Matt, about those times of, we are just the two of us and we were looking for a product idea.
Yeah, going back to like Astropad, really
Ah,
Astropad,
sure. Yeah.
like even
Hmm.
then, or
Yeah.
Luna. I mean, yeah, I mean, definitely it was tossed around a lot of ideas. A lot of ideas get tossed around before we even work on anything.
Hmm. Yeah, because I feel like Luna, in some ways, we had a mission that we were trying to solve. Like people have been asking us for a
Mm-hmm.
product like Luna. The innovation came from going into hardware.
Yeah, yeah. Which actually, let me back up a bit on
Uh-huh.
Luna. So to give people some background. So Astropad, because it's a software only tool, has always been able to mirror your screen. And so you use the iPad to mirror what you had and you could draw right on top of it with Astropad. But people pretty quickly, like almost right away, were like, hey, the iPad's a great screen. Can I use this as another screen and not just mirror? And there wasn't a good way to do that. There were some software hacks, some kernel extensions and things you could do, but it was
Hmm.
super, super unreliable. Some third parties had done better than others and like working around some of these kinks, but none of it worked very well. None of it had GPU support. It was just like a total no go for us, especially when we were expecting to use creative apps, things like Photoshop that, well, it uses the GPU. Actually, macOS in general expects there to be a GPU. So a lot of funky stuff happens. And so we knew people were looking for this. And well, I would say the idea came from an unexpected place. What do you remember from the
Yeah, yeah,
initial?
yeah. We knew about this problem for a while, and we've been trying to solve it in so many ways, which it seems to be consistent too for designing product, where you pick up a problem, you try to solve it. No, that's not the right thing. You put it down. You move on to something else, and you go back at it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we've done this over and over, where we try to solve a problem, and the first few routes are dead end.
Mm-hmm. Or the technology or the time's not right or the,
Yeah, that
many
too.
things, many
Hmm.
things, especially hardware, it's too expensive to make. Could be a big thing.
And for Luna, it was really like we tried to come up with software solution first because that's what we
Mm-hmm.
knew best. And through that, we realized that just a software solution would be really unreliable.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the idea was, what I remember is, what I started wondering is, how do people solve these problems on in server farms?
Yes, I remember this. Yep.
Because in server farms, computers don't have displays, and they still would want to take advantage of acceleration on the GPU, on the graphic card. So I started looking into what servers would use for enabling video acceleration. And it turned out they were using a similar headless display as what we end up designing with Luna. It was very different in the way it functioned because it was a very static,
Yeah.
kind
Much
of
simpler than Luna.
Yeah, in fact, they call them dummy displays or dummy plugs.
Ghost displays. There's
Ghost displays.
Bunch of different names for them, yeah.
But that was really the core of the idea that, okay, this problem had actually been solved in hardware, and that took us down the path of turning into a hardware company ourselves.
Yeah, and I remember some users also, we had a community forum at the time, and I remember some users too dabbling with this. And also they were using a third-party tool, SwitchResX, to take these dummy displays and to configure it so that it would work with Luna. And this was like a crazy complicated process to do. Like, we weren't even aware of this. We were aware of as Giovanni talked about, we were aware of the dummy dongles and like experimenting with that. But in terms of like customizing the resolution to match the iPad, you know, some of our users are really taking this an extra step beyond what we considered. And so seeing that people were doing that too was like, wow, people really, really want this if they're going that far out of their way to make this work. Because this is a crazy like duct tape up solution. That also kind of triggered like, okay, maybe there's really something here. Like maybe this is something people would be interested in. And I remember we also tried to use, you know, we looked at, okay, how would we use like an off the shelf? Like, do we tell our users to go buy one of these dummy displays and then we can configure it? But these things, as you said, are dummy. They're not configurable. They're like set to like a 1080p resolution. That's it. That's all you get. And or even less than 1080p because they just wanted a display to show up. And we had specific characteristics, specific refresh rates and resolutions and different things to really make a good experience on the iPad. None of these things could do it. So I don't remember how it went from that, though, to the leap to like, well, let's make our own that can do it.
Yeah. Well, we saw potential in hardware, but we didn't know much about hardware. So
never done hardware at this point.
Yep. Didn't know really too much about it. I think what started really us getting into more serious about it is I started talking about this problem with a friend of mine who had worked at Apple, actually together with the two of us at some point, Matt.
Yep. Yeah, we were interns all at the same time, way back in the day. Ancient history now.
That's right. But his name was Niels Madison, and he started a company himself in Sweden. He's Swedish originally. And he started a company in the home security space. And he had worked as a hardware engineer at Apple. So he's a fully fledged electrical engineer. So I talked to him about the problem, and I asked for his help to figure out how complicated such an undertaking would be. And he took some time. I think I sent him like a prototype of what was on the market already, these dummy displays. And I think he took it apart and tried to figure out the complexity. And he was the one that told me essentially, the level of degree of complexity the project would take. And he proposed himself to help in helping us design this product. At the time, he seemed he had some extra engineering capacity himself in his company. So we started this working relationship, which really started and got us to the point of having a first prototype of the Luna hardware. Fairly quickly, I think in 3-4 months, I want to say.
Yeah, they were pretty quick because, they were hardware showed up, so they had the full team and capabilities to do hardware. They knew what they were doing. We didn't. With hardware.
That's
so
right.
they could move quick on it. And yeah, they did move really quick.
And I think having the relationship with them based a lot on trust and friendship was really instrumental because I think we were trying to figure things out together. And, down the road of Luna, we had to rely a lot on other people's skills because we didn't have them ourselves.
Which was definitely a new thing for us because we were used to operating in the software world where we generally, especially on the Mac and iPad, where we generally knew what we were doing or to some degree.
Yeah. That was the biggest maybe evolution of the whole project. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You couldn't jump in and modify the PCB or the components on the board ourselves. We had to always rely on other people.
Yep.
Which is a good skill to learn in general, but
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, but I remember in 4 or 5 months after we started the project, both of us were in Sweden.
Yeah, that was fun.
Visiting the offices and seeing the first prototypes.
Yeah, we saw the first prototypes, which was super cool. They were working on that. The company too is Minute. They're around today. And actually, even then, their main product is, privacy conscious noise sensor for like Airbnbs. And it has more than just noise sensors on it, but I think that's what it's most popular for. But all sorts of sensors on it. So really, really cool, like home automation stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we went there, checked it out. And this, one thing I should say though, that's important about this is this was a mini DisplayPort unit. This only connected over mini DisplayPort because at the time, which we'll get to in a bit, mini DisplayPort was really the only connection that mattered on the Mac for doing displays. USB-C wasn't a thing yet.
That's right.
It was only on some like really, really early PC models. Apple had not released a USB-C computer yet.
Yeah, picking up a project and putting down a project. Just shortly after we were meeting with our friend in Sweden, rumors came out that Apple would jump on the USB-C boat and essentially ditch every other port that they had on previous computers. So we found ourselves essentially with already a prototype that would be probably turning into, kind of a legacy device for a legacy port.
Obsolete prototype.
That's right. That's the right word, obsolete. And, as soon as we realized that, we also understood that it would not have been possible to launch an innovative product if we didn't support the latest and greatest hardware. Yeah. And I remember we went back and forth a lot about this also with them, whether, it made sense perhaps to just launch mini display first. What was the minimal viable product for the Luna hardware? Was it just the mini DisplayPort edition?
And I remember talking to them because before this, we were planning a Kickstarter. We were gearing up to do a Kickstarter together. This was really going to be a joint project, really us providing the software, them providing the hardware, and to really be a successful joint project. And then we hit this hurdle of USB-C, where we're debating, as you're saying, do we need USB-C? Do we need USB-C? And we're saying yes, yes, yes. But on the hardware side, it turns out that USB-C is a lot harder to do. And because it was so new, nobody really had experience with it. And in terms of components, there wasn't a lot of components either available yet. This was just totally new. Nothing, prices were high on components. They were hard to get because all of this was so new. So I remember they were very hesitant to get into the USB-C space.
Yep. It was just a huge risk for them. And it made a lot of sense.
Absolutely. And it wasn't their core product.
Yep. So we put the project on pause for a long time. We essentially canceled the collaboration with Minute, and we just, even us didn't know whether we would have continued.
No.
And it passed probably 9 months until we picked it up again.
Yeah, and I remember, I think it was that WWDC that year, Apple officially released the USB-C MacBook Pros, and that's what really, really put the stake in it at the time. Because before that, everything was all speculation, and we're like, well, maybe this is a year out. If we have a year, we can still release with just mini DisplayPort. But if Apple comes out with a USB-C Mac today, we got to support it. And so I remember waiting to see, okay, what's going to happen? Is Apple? And then I remember they released the USB-C, and we're like, okay.
Yep.
I guess that's the end of the project for now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then we forgot about Luna. We were working on the Astropad Studio, and I think we went back into working on our core product, which at the time was just Astropad, and then it became Astropad Studio. And we liked the idea of Luna. We really wanted it to make it happen, but it wasn't the right time.
No, it wasn't. I remember even before the USB-C saga, we talked a lot about, like, should we be pursuing this? This is so different than what we currently do. Like, we've never done hardware. We don't know anything about it. This is require like logistics and shipments and VAT tax and sales tax and an e-commerce store and all these things.
Manufacturing.
Oh yeah. How could I even forget manufacturing? All these things we know nothing about.
Yep.
Does this really make sense for us to get into? And we went back and forth a lot on it. And I remember one thing that kept coming up was, well, even if standalone, it's not a great product like nobody wants it as a product by itself, which turned out not to be the case. People love Luna as its own product, but it'll still be really, really good for Astropad because this is functionality people want. And
that's right.
We want to be able to go toe to toe with whatever Wacom's doing, and this is a key feature of what Wacom Cintiqs can do for drawing display, for pen displays. We need to be able to have this functionality. So let's keep pursuing down that path. And if we can pull it off, it'll be a major competitive advantage because who the heck else does hardware? And then also the interest in it too. Like, well, this is some new skills to learn, even if it ultimately doesn't lead anywhere. We're learning a lot, having fun doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at times fun, at times stressful, a little bit of both together.
Yeah, but I think you bring up a really good point, which is the playfulness of when you enter a new space and you commit into a project. I think for everything that we've gotten into successfully, there was a very strong characteristic of experimentation.
Yeah, definitely.
And playfulness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like for us, hardware was such an uncharted territory that while it was scary, was also very intriguing and new. And so we were hungry for that challenge in some ways. And at times we were like, what did we get ourselves into?
Yeah, maybe this wasn't a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was always the kind of desire to explore a new territory.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was the drive that I think kept it going forward. Because there's a lot of times where it was like, we should just cancel this. This is a distraction. We shouldn't do this.
Oh, yeah, so many times.
And so many times we'd run into a hurdle and be like, no, this is just another sign we shouldn't do this. And just tons of up and downs like that, Oh my gosh, now Apple hasn't introduced a new port in years, and all of a sudden there's a new port we need to support. Oh man, is this another sign we shouldn't do this? So many times, as you said, then left it, didn't come back to it for months and months and months. It's definitely not a up and to the right experience, not a stepwise kind of thing.
Yep.
Definitely a lot of peaks and valleys.
And I remember just even when we started seeing the product through, even before we launched the Kickstarter, we had conversation and doubts of whether we wanted to target Luna just for Astropad customers, or we wanted to expand the reach to anybody that wants to use their iPad as a second display can benefit from it. But it was far from clear, and even within the company, I remember some members of our team just really being skeptical that we could sell Luna as a standalone product.
And at a much higher price. I mean, we weren't sure of that either, but it was going to be much higher price than a typical software because it had physical components. It had to be shipped. It had to be manufactured. It had to be totally different economics around it than digital software. So I was like, are people going to buy it?
Yep. Yeah. So it's in retrospect, there was a lot of doubt, insecurity about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and as we're talking about this, I'm thinking a lot of this was the same for when we were originally doing Astropad as well, too. There was a lot of doubt. Is anybody going to use this? Is it going to work well enough? I'm trying to remember what other, but that was also another thing that was not a just, linear process, always improving. It was a lot of up and downs. It was a lot of maybe we shouldn't do this. But at the end of the day, we were, as you said, there was a playfulness with it. We were really interested in it, and we're like, well, if nobody buys it, it'll still be a, example of the kind of cool stuff we can build.
Yeah, it's true. It's like most of the days you're having fun doing it, then there's still probably some value to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I do remember a ton with Luna, though, talking about like, yeah, should we be doing this? I mean, what do you remember from that? What do you remember why we didn't cancel it?
I think the way also we kept it going was, so to go back to the history of Luna, once the project was canceled in the summer with our friends in Sweden, then for 9 months really we basically got the resources and the assets from the Swedish company, but we didn't really do much. And then we hired a consulting company, Krakotronics, that helped us pick up the USB-C project. And we established a very different relationship. This was a consultancy shop whose purpose was essentially helping other companies like us to bring up their hardware dream to the world. And it was the effort that we went through with them was very external in some ways to our main company. At the time, I think we were 6 people or 6 or 7 people in the...
Yeah, sounds about right.
And we're focusing on, the drawing experience on the iPad with the product Astropad and Astropad Studio. And the Luna effort is sort of happening in this other kind of room in the house that is very separate from our core business. It's sort of an experiment happening behind the scenes. I don't think at the time we would even talk too much or give status updates on how things were going.
No, I don't think the team heard too much about it. It was like a background thing because they were really working on USB-C.
And for a month, we didn't know whether we could even pull it off on USB-C because it was so new that even I remember to get the chipset to talk USB-C, essentially the microprocessor to talk to USB-C port. I remember we got some early samples from some Cyprus, and we had only like a handful available.
And I remember too, the contractor we were working with, they specialized in USB in general, and USB-C was so new, they had no experience with it. So this was totally, I mean, that's part of why they were interested in the project as well too, because this was a great way for them to get experience on USB-C. But there was so much uncharted territory here.
Yep.
So yeah, we kept it in the background, like you're saying. It wasn't like a main focus.
And I think, if I remember right, I think it was 6 months, more or less, until we could actually see, after collaborating for 6 months with this consultancy company, they gave us a prototype that would show actually some promising results that would give us the confidence that we could actually do USB-C Luna.
And one thing I remember too that also carried us through with this is that we did put some together, like hooked up some software with like a software prototype to go with these early hardware prototypes. And what we saw was awesome. Like we were really blown away by the result. So we're like, oh, wow, if we can get this all to work, this is really, really good. And then I remember into the USB-C process, we're like, wow, the USB-C is even better suited to what we want to do. The mini display port, the product can be even better. And it was even more enticing. It was like, wow, okay, if we can see this through, we think this can be a really, really good product. It's just a matter of, can we actually see it through? Can we actually manufacture this thing? Can we build it? But the prototypes, I remember, was outstanding. It was like really...
Yeah, it was really promising, exciting.
Yeah, really close. Yeah, removed a lot of the doubt we had.
Yep. Yeah. Another takeaway, though, as we were talking, is really like the unpredictable nature of progress through the development of a project. You really go from, okay, we're never being able to pull this off. This is just too hard to, wow, this is really exciting. Let's do it. No, this is going to be too hard. We hadn't accounted for this. It's far from a linear process, and the progress is far from linear too, in a way where, yeah, you could have like interjected conversation between the two of us within those 6 month period where we either thought it was like greatest thing ever
yeah
or the worst, we should totally cancel it, this is a waste of time,
this
energy.
is just a waste of everybody's time. Why did we ever do this? Nobody's ever going to buy this. This is dumb. This is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yes. And I think that the tendency of canceling thing too, there's like a voice that sometimes comes in, is like, okay, this is all bad, let's just cancel it, let's move on. And we found this voice to be there over and over and over again in different projects where, I mean, even just 2 weeks ago, I think we were talking about where a new idea that I was pitching to you, and it was like, okay, let's just cancel this. Like it's just not worth it. And then, you pulling me out from it.
Yeah, that's very true. Cause we can't reveal yet, but some new stuff in the works. And yeah, there were being a setback and you were just like, one too many setbacks in a row. Yeah, and you were like, yeah, I don't know this makes sense anymore. I remember the same dynamic happening too during other projects too. But I'm like, wait, we've gotten this far. This is really cool. Why are we going to stop now? And you're like, oh. Or it might be me. Like I remember in early days of Astropad, at that particular week, I hated how the Mac UI looked for whatever reason. I don't know what happened. Don't ask me. But I was like, it's all terrible. We need to burn it all down.
Yeah,
start
it was
over.
like 2 weeks before launch.
Yeah. And you're like, Matt, what are you talking about? This is great. What are you talking about? I'm like, okay, fine. You talked me off the ledge,
Yeah, sometimes the details that you get fixated on also make it really hard to see the overall progress that you're making.
Yeah. It is definitely hard when you're that close to what you're working on to see it and obsess over details that maybe in the big scheme of things don't matter or won't make or break the successful launch of it. Definitely something we've come back to time and time again.
And again, it goes back to the messy side of just going from, just an idea to actually executing on a product and bringing it to reality.
Yeah. And then once you get further along and you're, committed to it and you've kind of flushed out the risks of it, what's going to be hard and what's not, then it can become more of a, once you're past the prototype stage, more of a linear process, more of a like, okay, let's put blood, sweat, and tears into to ship it. But before that, it's so stop and go. at least for us. And I have to imagine for most people making something new, it's like that.
Yeah, which brings up the point of, if you stop doing it, what do you do with after that? It's good to have something to fall back to. For Astropad, I think while we were working on Astropad, we had a consultancy business on the side. So we would go back to our clients. And for Luna, well, we had Astropad Studio. They were our core business. And so that's what we went back to. But I still feel like it's very important not to put all your eggs in the basket of the new product route, because most often the pressure to be successful might spoil the progress or the leap of faith that you need to take into exploring a new product. It's so hard to work on brand new things that the lack of just direction and purpose can be very overwhelming if you're expecting results in a very quickly manner. And I personally find it that it's important to have a backup plan that is solid to fall back into when your energies are just run out.
Yeah, and to cook up some new ideas to bring back to it. Many times for even projects we're working on now, the technology around changes, the ecosystem around changes, and may make it more viable.
That's true.
I know I'm being very, very abstract here.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
But yeah, things change, and you're like, wow, okay, before we couldn't do this, but now material costs have come down. Maybe in terms of software, there's a new third-party API you can use. There's a new, like I'm thinking on the software side, there's the GPT-3 stuff where they're doing all sorts of AI stuff. Like that's opened up all sorts of new possibilities. And 5 years ago, you might have had all sorts of crazy ideas that weren't possible that now today are possible. And you just got to go back to that same idea and revisit it with whatever today's technology is, whatever you can do with today's stuff. In the case of hardware, whatever chipsets or materials it is, batteries, what does it unlock? What can you, I don't know, that's part of the fun part about the hardware stuff too, is just keeping an eye on what's coming out of the supply chain, what's cheap, what's available, what are the new things coming up.
Yeah. So for, I think we should find some recommendations to wrap up the conversation today and see if we can find some recommendation for our audience to give you a suggestion on how to get started on working on ideas and products.
That's good advice. Well, where would you start, Giovanni? What would be your recommendations for dealing with the messy beginnings of a new product?
Yeah, I think emphasizing the playfulness of the process. Make sure that whatever you're doing, experimentation and fun are a big component of it. Because at the end of the day, worst case scenario, you had a good time and you've learned a lot doing it.
Yeah, definitely the on and off nature of it too, where don't expect it to go up and to the right in a linear fashion, and one step after another there's gonna be a lot of setbacks. There's gonna be a lot of up and downs. You're gonna start and stop. You're gonna hate it. You're gonna love it. There's gonna be a lot of extremes in general, and that is probably pretty normal.
Yeah, those are just too great. Yeah, I think to know these things, I think it will really help give you the confidence to go forward.
Yeah,
and making progress.
Yeah, and know like what you're experiencing, what you're feeling is not unique, and what previously, today seems like a brilliant idea. Probably when that person was working on it, they were probably like, "This is dumb. I shouldn't be spending time on it." Right? They had those moments. I'm sure they did. Just as you said, another one is have something to fall back on. What we were talking about, where you're not feeling it, the energy's not there, the technology isn't ready. Right? It needs more time. Something else to fall back, something else to work on, something else to recharge you. And so you come back with fresh ideas, fresh energy as well.
Yeah, I reframed the idea of failure, because I think that's been also pretty hard for me is, new ideas are very fragile. They're really tender, they're half baked. And when you introduce them to other people, you're going to get all sort of feedback. And most of the time might not be that supportive.
Yeah.
There's a sense of bravery that I think it needs to be developed. Yeah, for you to feel good about still your days in which you're exploring and trying to come up with new ideas.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, yeah, I think that just about does it. Thanks again for coming on, Giovanni, talking about product ideas.
Anytime.
Yeah, for those of you listening, check us out, astropad.com/podcast. Please send me questions, feedback, matt@astropad.com. And if you like what you're listening to, please rate us. It does help a lot on iTunes. Thank you. Take care now.